Namaskar, a very good evening to everyone here from the East, and wishing a great morning and a great day ahead to everyone who's joining in from the West. I'm Sakshi, and I, on behalf of the Dais team and partners, welcome all of you to this very, very special event, which is called Bridging the East and the West. So I think the event doesn't need any more introduction. In fact, I believe that it holds a very special meaning to all of us, like why we are present here. To be present here together is to celebrate spirituality and love as the love that links all of us together as a thread. And one such living testimony of this love and spirituality was Baba Ramdas. It is quite interesting that anybody and everybody who kind of commences, this journey of self-awareness, or who's trying to find clarity and, trying to know more about themselves, they have one or two things in common. And one of those is the guides that they follow while on their journey of self-awareness. I think it's true, isn't it? Because we are all here because we know Baba Ramdas in some way or the other. And I believe he has guided all of us by his thoughts and learnings in some way. So, well, if I take a moment to talk about how I found about Baba Ramdas, I think it would make for a very interesting story. So as much as I want to say that I know Baba Ramdas close, I have been following Baba Ramdas for years. I actually cannot, because that is not the truth. I've not been following him for years. I came across Baba Ramdas on Instagram, and it was last year basically when the pandemic just began. So I'm an undergraduate student in Osaka, and when the pandemic hit, I just packed my bags and went back to India. And I think everybody can relate to that, situation, to that, where we were placed in a space where everything came to a halt, and we did not know what to do with ourselves. So I could not just run on an autopilot and go back to my university things. And I had all this time in the world which kind of forced me to sit with my thoughts. And that part was very scary because um, before the pandemic, a lot had happened around me. And there were a lot of events and thoughts that were bottled up in my mind, which I did not take time to process. And when I was sitting in that position where I had so much time, I had to sit with my thoughts. So then I kind of felt very, very confused. And I mean, I still feel sometimes it's that feeling that never goes, I think. But yes, I felt that very strongly. And I went on the internet and researched about this, how to solve, like researched all about mental health and stuff. And I came across a very renowned psychologist's page, Instagram page, who followed Baba Ramdas. And that's how I came in contact with his page. I honestly don't know much about his personal life, and maybe that's why I'm here to learn more about him and his life. But from the bits I try to surround myself with on social media about his teachings, I think his teachings help me sit with my try to tell me to sit in the present moment, and that's what I'm very grateful about. So I won't take, like, if I just go on and on, I will start rambling now. So I will just like to call upon Devesh Gupta from Emerge, who would pay tributes to Baba Ramdas. Devesh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sakshi, so much. Namaste and Ram Ram from India. As I begin to understand as to what is to be talked about Ramdas, sudden jolts of energy rush through my cells. For any description I will give of the described will be limited. And Ramdas is not a body, a person, an idea which can die. Ramdas is love, and love is activated. It is still here, right here. In Hinduism, Ram is the god, and Das is the servant, who serves the true, the one, selflessly being in loving awareness. A living awareness of love, compassion, energy. Baba Ramdas's life can never be put into a compartment. For from where I see, he lived a fierce life, explored anything and everything that is under the sun or behind the moon to find out what is true and what is not. And this faith and remembrance fueled his journey. Or, like he says, Guru chooses the disciple. He got led to meet Neem Karoli Maharaj, and the rest is history leading to this moment. And if you are here, you already are a part of it. It is not a coincidence. There is no glitch. You are exactly supposed to be here. So, what else can you do than to open your hearts and have a profound experience? For there is nowhere to go. Baba Ramdas left his body on 22nd December 2019. But where can he go? He is still here. I met Ramdas through his or Maharaj-ji's book, Be Here Now, you see. I never met him in body. So the attachment to his body never happened. When I opened Be Here Now for the first time, I had actually confused Baba Ramdas to be Neem Karoli Maharaj with the picture. Did his passing away hurt me? Yes. Did I have grief? Yes. Has he gone anywhere? No. What ended? The fear of death. For nothing changed. He has still been here. Form changes, spirit and awareness, they are right here. So you see, Baba Ramdas has never left. No one really leaves. And this understanding is a grace which came to me from Baba Ramdas, his life being a message of learning to become one and learning to let go. The jewel he carried back in his heart led to many finding their way back home, to the one, to their own selves, to Neem Karoli Maharaj. And Ramdas became the bridge to science, to Western philosophy, different religions, to the language of heart, to the loving awareness. And Rameshwar Das ji, Krishna Das ji, and many others are carrying the same awareness with them, which also resides within each one of us. And all we have to do is to be here now and remember that we are all one. Before meeting Neem Karoli Maharaj, Ramdas's experience with Timothy Leary and many others with entheogens, observing life and nature, his own training in psychology and academic background, further formed the ground for him to understanding the love of Neem Karoli Maharaj. Baba Ramdas transcended his own ego and knowledge, and I'd like to quote Baba Ramdas here. I would rather be in love than being right. What Baba Ramdas has done is that he has given the words which can remind the self of the higher states of consciousness, which is unity in nature. And his words act as a mirror, as a ladder, to set one free from their own selves and to be in love. His words are true transmissions, which are happening from a place which is beyond space time, beyond the realm of the mind. He speaks from love, or love speaks through Baba Ramdas. Baba Ramdas has not only been a bridge between philosophies, but also generations. The seva and the sense of service, his different projects like the prison project, the dying project, with the Seva Foundation for the Blinded, are few examples I'd like to share. To further put light, Ramdas says, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. When I know who I am you. A journey from duality to oneness, to unity, to here we are in the present. The meaning of what service is and what action is has to be understood. The point where the server, the served, and the action are part of one. That has to happen from the understanding of the space time we are at. The path to God passes through love and service. The learning about not identifying with a particular thing as to who we are, a path to God without a lineage. Baba Ramdas has shown us how to use everything in our life as a vehicle to get free. He says, while some are trying to get higher in this game, some want it to be done. Love, serve, remember. Three words given to Baba Ramdas by Neem Karoli Maharaj as a way to transcend, became an organization which kept loving, serving, remembering since then. From George Harrison's song of Be Here Now to Steve Jobs looking for Neem Karoli Maharaj, Mark Zuckerberg to Larry Brilliant. There can be countless correlation and causations which can be drawn out. But this is all a Leela, a divine Leela, like Maharaj-ji would say. a point where free will meets determinism. And all of us being here is also set. It is just being acted out. So I thank you all for being open. And beyond that, I would like to thank the one. So here we are at one of the book launch of Baba Ramdas. Did we do anything? Or is it all determined? Does the question even matter? I am living it. And many others see the same magic in their life. And that's how it is. Maharaj-ji's and God's work happen on its own. We are just here to learn and witness, to become one in his dance. And that's the only dance there is, where when we are one, there is not you, not I, only the dance. There can never be a conclusion or a limited legacy which can be spoken of. What we can do is to remember that we are one. And in that remembrance is remembering Baba Ramdas, remembering Neem Karoli Maharaj, and in acting in the world, in society, from our heart, where there is no subject object differentiation, where we are all one, where we are all walking each other home. Being Ramdas is not a journey of a separate being, it is a journey to home, from I to we, from them to us, and to the one. Love, selflessness, truth, purity is what Ramdas means, and that manifesting into action. I'd like to thank the Dais for the great work they are doing. I'd also like to thank Mr. Keshav Gupta, his entire team, Mr. Rameshwar Das ji, for giving me this opportunity, and also to Krishna Das ji, Love Serve Remember, Raghu Marcus, Nina Rao ji, my own parents and family, and thousands of us who have lived the message and learning given to all of us in our lives through this divine happening, and also to everyone for doing what they are doing with loving awareness. Thank you once again. Ram Ram.
Thank you for those words, Devesh. It was beautifully put. And like you said, like Baba Ramdas said, that we are all walking each other home. That's very true. And keeping that in mind, we are now going to begin this conversation. It is my immense pleasure to introduce to all of you Rameshwar Das, a writer and photographer who has known him closely since 1968. He has collaborated with Ram Das on many projects, most recently as co author of Be Love Now and Polishing the Mirror. Rameshwar Das has also co-authored, as Devesh Gupta has put, the memoir Being Ramdas. So I congratulate you on behalf of everyone, Rameshwar Das. We're also joined by Keshav Gupta, who would be the moderator of this conversation. He's the founder of the Dais and the International Center for Sustainable Development. And before we begin this insightful conversation, I would like to touch down upon some housekeeping rules. This event is divided into two segments. The first segment, we will get to hear the insightful conversation between Rameshwar Das and Keshav Gupta. Participants are encouraged to use the chat box freely and reaction buttons freely to voice out their impressions on this conversation. We also have a page on the website dedicated to pay tributes to Baba Ramdas. Please feel free to click on the link that is being shared on the chat box and share about your journey and how Baba Ramdas helped you in your self-awareness. However, I would request everyone to please keep your mics on mute all this while so that we can enjoy this conversation. And please rest assured that there will be a Q&A session after this segment ends for all the attendees. So you can reserve your questions for that segment. So let's be here now and start the conversation. Keshav Gupta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sakshi and Devesh. I think that it was a very moving, reflective set of words that Devesh had used, and I'm sure they will keep unfolding in my mind as we move along. I would like to welcome all of you, all the people who are joining us on Facebook Live on the Zoom session, and most importantly, our speaker for today, our guide for today, Rameshwar Das ji. Rameshwar Das ji, we are so humbled and privileged to have you join us today.
I think I'm the one who's feeling humbled by all these introductions. And they were very beautifully put. And, that this gathering is kind of a celebration of the India publication of Ram Dass' memoir. And it feels so much to me like this is a full circle, that Ram Dass brought some fragment of the wisdom of the India and the East back to us as Westerners. And I hope that his reflections on how that came together in his Western view is helpful to all of us now. And it just feels like we have, and especially as we talk, I'm on the East Coast of the US, you're in India. We're all tied together.
Absolutely, and Ram Dass has played a transformative role for many of us. I think that's part of the reason why we're all here. And I can very quickly share that for me, Be Here Now was how I got introduced to Ram Dass. I did not know that I had already been to Kanchi Ashram as a child with my family. And once I told my parents excitedly, "Do you know about Neem Karoli Baba?" And they're like, "Child, we took you there when you were little, and you have been there." So, yeah, it was. It's quite profound. And right before the pandemic as well, I can say that I was going to Rishikesh for the film festival, and I magically woke up at 6 in the morning and I saw the Rishikesh ashram for Maharaj-ji, and I saw myself at Hanuman Chalisa's exact timing at the Rishikesh ashram. I later on found out Ram Dass had also visited the ashram, spent time there. So it's been very overwhelming in that sense. And throughout the pandemic, we got associated with Krishna Das ji and Rameshwar Das ji. It's been a magical journey since then, since the day I first stepped foot in the ashram in Rishikesh, I think. And the pandemic has been pretty hard on all of us, but within that struggle, I have experienced the magic or the miracle of love, so to say. So it's a big honor for all of us, Rameshwar Das ji, to host you today, and we have a few questions for you that we will be dwelling with. So the first question that I would like to ask you is to know about your journey before you actually met Baba Ram Dass or Richard Alpert, 1968, and then coming to India in 1970. So. Who was Rameshwar Das before that time period?
Well, I was in university when I met Ram Dass, and my name was James Litton before I was given Rameshwar Das by Neem Karoli Baba. And I was very interested in psychedelic research, and I didn't know anything about Ram Dass and not very much about India. And he was booked to speak as Richard Alpert at the university where I was in Connecticut in USA. And it was kind of early in the spring when that part of the world is basically frozen mud. And he walked in and he was wearing kind of white robes and had a long beard. And he no longer looked like Professor Richard Alpert at all. So he started speaking and he brought together his experience with psychology and psychedelics. And then he started talking about learning yoga and meeting Neem Karoli Baba, who he wouldn't name, by the way. Maharaj-ji had said, "Don't talk about me," which of course was all he did when he came to USA. And something happened in that talk, and he started talking. It was in a kind of student lounge where, people were sitting very informally. And He started speaking at 7 in the evening and he talked until 3 in the morning. And it changed my view. It was a darshan, and it was a darshan of Neem Karoli Baba, as I figured out later when I came to India about a year and a half afterwards. And I met Neem Karoli Baba, and I felt the same thing when I saw Neem Karoli Baba as I had experienced from Ram Dass that evening. And it was, I can only describe it as kind of a change in point of view, you know, from seeing myself as the center of the universe to suddenly feeling the universe all around me and myself as kind of a speck of dust, which I suppose we all have experiences like that at one moment or another. But I didn't know Richard Alpert. I've learned more about Richard Alpert from doing this project with Ram Dass than I ever knew at that point.
That's quite an insight, and I did not know about the talk that you're talking about. But I think taking from there, when you came to India and you had a darshan of Maharaj-ji in a ethereal form, so to say, when you were with Ram Dass earlier. So when you did meet Maharaj-ji finally, so could you and I know you came with Krishna Das, and Danny Goldman also was with you when all of you came in 1970. So how was the actual moment physically when you met Maharaj-ji? I just entered the ashram for the first time and I was in euphoria and tears. So I can't imagine how possibly it was for you. I'd love to know about it from you.
Well, I also had that, you know, incredible anticipation. And as the Kenshi ashram where I went to see him is down in the bottom of a river valley in the Kumaon Hills. And as you drive down, you go on all these switchbacks descending the hills and into the valley, and you catch glimpses of Kenshi, of the white temple buildings and the orange spires. And it was hard to believe the reality that I was actually there at that point. And when I entered the place and saw Maharaj-ji for the first time, I felt like I was coming home, in kind of home in the heart. And I can only compare it to something like when I used to visit my grandparents, who I loved very much when I was a kid. And it was that feeling of coming to a place that I felt very deeply within. And then when I saw Maharaj-ji, it was, you know, it was amazing to see him in a body, because it was this darshan of a place within myself that I had experienced before, and I experienced it again when I saw him. And the first thing he said, practically after we had seen him for a minute or two, he said, go feed them. And he sent us out across the way, and they gave us puris and aloo in large quantities. And I ate so much that I think I kind of came back into my body at that point of that prasad.
That's I can't even say I can relate, because there's no way, I'm sure, for our generation for now to experience that powerful moment with Maharaj-ji in the physical form. But it's I would love to know from you, like, how transformative, like, not only your time with Maharaj-ji was during your stay and meeting him, But like you went to Bodh Gaya as well with Ramdas, and you traveled through to learn so many incredible things. I think Ramdas, and you have traveled around everywhere. I would love to know from you a a couple of stories that you can tell us about, and especially the Allahabad Kumbh story. I would
Hmm.
love to know from you, and also, were you able to absorb those changes while they were happening, and how was it with how was Ramdas also evolving at that point in time through these experiences while you were with each other?
Well, I think these experiences, I mean, Ramdas always talked about, don't collect experiences. It's not about collecting experiences. and those moments were almost like, seeds that were planted. And also the practices like learning Vipassana meditation in Bodh Gaya. And, I had ideas in my head of kind of repeating what Ramdas had done and becoming Ramdas Jr. or something like that, and learning yoga and studying with his teachers. And I asked Maharaj-ji about that soon after we had arrived, and about studying yoga. And he said, if you want to do sadhana, do Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. And I realized later he had given me guru mantra at that moment, but it was very casual. And again, that the seed of that and that understanding that the practices are not just the externals, that it's an inner practice that's reverberated over the years, through my whole life. And in that first couple of months, we, Krishnadas and Danny and a few other Westerners and I had time with Maharaj-ji, and then he would send us away. He would only allow us to come, a couple of days a week to the ashram. And at one point, he sent us to see some other Baba in Mussoorie. So we dutifully went to see this Baba, and he had said, come back on a certain day. So we came back and he had vanished. Maharaj-ji was gone. No one would tell us where he had gone or knew. We couldn't tell which, but he might have left instructions, just, don't tell anybody where I'm going. And we didn't see him for a good 2 months after that. And in that interval, Ramdas returned to India. He had been traveling with Swami Muktananda on his return to India. And when he came to Kenchi, because of the time he had spent with Muktananda, Maharaj-ji had left by then because it was getting cold and he didn't stay in the hills usually after a certain point. And we didn't know where he was. So some of the Western group had heard about this course in Bodh Gaya. So we went to study Vipassana with a wonderful teacher named Goenka, and another teacher, Manindra, at the Burmese Vihara in Bodh Gaya, which is years later, a niece of mine took a semester abroad in India. And where did she go but the Burmese Vihara in Bodh Gaya? It was really crazy. And at the end of that course, Goenka was teaching 10-day courses in Vipassana. And I think we did 3 or maybe 4 of them in a row. And we'd have a day or 2 in between the courses. And in one of those, Danny went to see the Kumbh Mela in Allahabad. So when we left Bodh Gaya at the end of the course, there were some of the Westerners who had traveled to India in a fancy bus, come overland, And they got the bus driver to come pick us up, and about 30 of us were driving to Delhi in this bus. And Danny said, "Oh, let's go look at the Mela. There might still be some sadhus there, and we could see the Mela grounds, although it was mostly over." So we, Ram Dass was kind of the commander-in-chief, as Maharaj-ji later designated him, but he kind of agonized over whether we should take the detour to Allahabad, since it was probably all over. And we went to, and we turned off to just take a look at the area around the Mela grounds. And as we drove down toward the Sangam in Allahabad, there's a Hanuman temple that's underground where Hanuman is laying prone, and standing by the side of the road with a wonderful old devotee named Dada Mukherjee was Maharaj-ji. And I was the one sitting in the front of the bus, and I spotted him, and I yelled out, "There's Maharaj-ji, stop the bus." And we all piled out of the bus, and we're in the, doing our pranams in the dust of the road. and they had us follow them to Dada's house. And so there's this Mercedes bus with 30 Westerners in it, trailing a cycle rickshaw through the streets of Allahabad. Rather as a sight. And we came to Dada's house, and they had lunch ready for us. And Maharaj-ji had told them exactly how many people to prepare lunch for.
Wow. There are so many miracles like these, or I think which so many of us have heard about and have been testament to, things which have just left us without understanding of it. Just marvel and sort of gawk at what Maharaj-ji is doing. But I wanted to also take your sort of focus on, once you had this very transformative time in India and you headed back, and in fact, because the ground action and the impact, the seva part of what Maharaj-ji taught about feeding everyone, and Ram Dass led some tremendous, with Larry Brilliant, led some tremendous initiatives. So I wanted to know how this internal journey that was also going on, like how did that start getting manifested externally in your life once you came back to the US, and also with Ram Dass, how Seva Foundation came into being, and would love to know a little bit more from you on that.
Well, again, the things that Maharaj-ji said when we would ask him about, how to do sadhana, and he would say, love everyone, feed everyone, or serve everyone, and remember God. And again, those were seeds that just reverberated for us, and we were trying to figure out how to translate that into life. And since he had given Ram Dass that name of servant of God, of Ram, which is the same as Hanuman, and all of Maharaj-ji's temples were to Hanuman, and we began to learn a little of that bhav of Hanuman as the great devotee and the incredible servant. And that combination of devotion and selfless action, for myself, I'll just say that I kept trying to understand how that could work in my own life. And Ram Dass, I think, got a much more, a deeper understanding of that. And he, in 1974, a year or so after Maharaj-ji had left the body, he taught a course in Boulder, Colorado, at a new institute started by a Tibetan teacher named Trungpa Rinpoche. And Trungpa had invited him to help start this new institute and invited him to teach a course in the Bhagavad Gita. And they also had dialogues together. And Trungpa had been trained at Oxford after he had left India, and he'd become an Oxford Don. And Ram Dass was a former Harvard professor. So it was kind of Oxford versus Harvard. And they were very competitive. I'm going to read a little piece of the memoir, if I can find it quickly, of let's see. This is his getting ready for the retreat, the course at between gigs on the holy man circuit, in quotes, I spent time at a satsang house in the Berkeley Hills where I'd see friends or seekers and catch up on correspondence. I'd meditate, then study commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, preparing for the summer course in Colorado. Trungpa was a former Oxford Don. I was a former Harvard professor. It was Oxford versus Harvard. By this time, I'd stopped actually lecturing. But this time, I would be teaching in front of the intellectually rigorous Buddhists. Trungpa's Lama training included philosophical debating. I was in over my head, presuming to take on the Bhagavad Gita, which had thousands of years of Sanskrit commentary. My old performance anxiety reared its head. I was a terrified graduate student all over again, sure that everyone would see through my facade. To prepare, I went on a desert retreat for 2 months, first at Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument in Arizona, and then at Joshua Tree Park in California. I lived in the van. I would study, outline my lectures, and then try them out on an audience of jackrabbits. They were a little different from the Naropa students, though both turned out to be a bit obtuse. And I want to share, if I can find it again, there's a photo of, let's see if I can get it up. Yeah, here. This is the, no, here we go. Is that coming up? There. This was the course at Naropa in that summer of 1974. And there were about 1,500 Westerners, and Ram Dass brought along about a dozen of the India crew who had been with him in India as so-called teaching assistants. And they included Joseph Goldstein, who helped to start the mindfulness movement in the West. And they started a wonderful retreat center called Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts. And Sharon Salzberg, who's also a wonderful Vipassana teacher who teaches the metta meditation, was camping on Joseph's living room floor. We were all kind of camping out together. But it was a really vibrant time, and Trungpa and Ram Dass would have these kind of debates on stage. And Trungpa would have his usual, what looked like a pitcher of water, but it's usually sake or vodka. They were quite wonderful discussions. He could be completely sloshed and still give the most pellucid lectures on Buddhist philosophy. And it was an interesting time. The book Paths to God that Ram Dass authored, it came from those lectures at Naropa. And it's, for Westerners particularly, it's a very interesting digest of the Bhagavad Gita. And we did a lot of exercises of how to serve and what that meant to do seva as opposed to the kind of social service that we'd grown up with as Westerners, the kind of doing good for other people. And seva really translated as doing service, but while working on yourself at the same time.
To begin with, I would say that reading a book is one thing, but you reading us passages is, I was closing my eyes and visualizing Ram Dass narrating the whole experience. So thank you. It's such a big privilege for all of us. And we hope that you read out more passages as well from the book. And I think I would like to sort of now come to the book being Ram Dass itself. I would love to know from you, what was the motivation behind, your motivation, Ram Dass's motivation behind putting this book together? What was happening while you discussed the project? And we'll begin with that on the book to begin with. Yeah.
Well, my motivation was completely selfish. I was living in New York, and Ram Dass had settled in on the island of Maui in Hawaii. And this had happened after the stroke. He ended up in Maui in, I think, 2004, after he had come to India for the last time. And I basically wanted to spend more time with him. So we'd worked on a couple of other projects, and I encouraged him to do this memoir, but he didn't want to do it. Partly, he was Mr. Be Here Now, and he was not interested in the past particularly. And I kind of talked him into it by agreeing, we kind of agreed that we would try to look at his life as if through the eyes of the guru, to get that perspective of a lifetime. And one of the early titles for it was Ram Dass, An Incarnation, to see this, just see his life as a life, not as, my life, but in the context of seeing it as one lifetime in a progression of spiritual development, and that view of karma and reincarnation and the spiritual evolution through lifetimes is I think, informed a lot of changes in the Western view of life and death. And I hope that it's helpful for Westerners in particular to understand that a little more. And it comes through, in his view of himself. So he finally agreed to that. And I think in terms of the process, he actually found it very helpful in the sense, especially of looking at things like from childhood that he had not really worked through, like, the control issues that he had with his mother, and, all of the stuff that we all carry, from our childhood, from our adolescence. And, he didn't have the easiest time. Nobody does. And I think seeing that, as just as part of a progression toward becoming who he was at that point, was very lightening for him. And for me, it was great fun. And it was it occurred over a period of really 10 years. And I used to go back and forth to Maui, and we would talk on the telephone and work on the phone, and I would write things and read them back to him, and he would comment on them, and we would discuss them, and it turned into a sprawling manuscript that eventually boiled down to this book.
Rameshwar, thank you so much for sharing this insight. I don't think I think I just feel very overwhelmed listening to you. I would love to know from you. You have seen Ramdas through Be Here Now, and I think for a lot of people in the world, somehow Be Here Now becomes a defining link, paths to God. All of there's all of what he's ever said is just so incredible. But when I read it, for me, it's also some sort of hero worship at times, that this is the book I want to go back to hit my reset buttons and so on. But you have seen Ramdas as a co-author, while it's Be Love now it's Being Ramdas. And you have seen that evolution, the journey of Ramdas, the collaborator, the author, something that probably a lot of us cannot claim a view from, right? So I wanted to ask you, how has that evolution been? Do you think that Ramdas, the author of Be Here Now, and Ramdas, what is the difference? And finally, where was loving awareness is one thing that he always was, as we had discussed once also, that he was very interested in towards this time. So what was the evolution like for you as a co-author? And what was it that Ramdas was converging to finally towards, while reflecting all of this, reconciling? I'll just add one last point around it, that you talked, it's very interesting that you talked about his mother, because I think when he had heard the word spleen is when he sort of broke through, so to say, like he really understood Maharaj-ji's power, or that miracle happened with him. So you're saying that he's also now reconciled that, like, look at those parts as well. So just what was the final set of thoughts around that for Ramdas? And yeah.
Well, I mean, the idea that that there is a spiritual evolution or a change certainly occurs to the extent that we're beings in time, and we go through a lifetime or lifetimes, and we are evolving and changing. But that's our perspective. I think from the perspective of, see if I can bring up this photo with Maharaj-ji. Is that there? Yeah. From Maharaj-ji's perspective, there was, I don't think it worked that way. And in that sense, when Ramdas came to him, it was as if that instant became eternal. And that's where Be Here Now always is for all of us. I mean, we all, when we can live fully in the present moment, we're just here. And that our awareness, our heart, but, our sense of that does change. And I think Ramdas in his, for instance, when he first came back to the States, he was talking a lot about planes of consciousness. And toward the end of his life, I think he lived much more in the heart. And especially after the stroke that he had in 1997, early 1997, which almost killed him. He lost his power of speech for a while. He had complete aphasia. And, that was the only reason he needed help writing books after that, because he'd done it all himself before that. And he went from being a great storyteller to a much quieter and more contemplative and much more in the heart. There's a wonderful quote from, there's a wonderful person who was one of the founders of Seva and started the hog farm commune in the 60s in the West Coast, he was called Wavy Gravy. And he's a great being. Anyway, he said Ram Dass went from being the master of the one-liner to the master of the ocean liner, because he spoke so slowly, in those later years, and it took him a while to get things out. But I think that space of loving awareness that you are referring to, and that was really a very simple but deep teaching in those later years. When we had retreats in which he led in the later years, he was, really quiet most of the time. Sometimes he would just sit on stage and there would be long intervals between sentences. But the space that he lived in, that heart space, brought everyone in. And that it was, he described it as which was really the description of how Maharaj-ji is also, as just radiating love. And I think that came through to people much more in those later years. Even though that when I first met him, I felt that love also. And that love was what came from within, and from a being like Maharaj-ji who lives in that place. Does that describe it at all? Don't know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, any number of words we put will not do justice to the life of Ram Dass. I think Devesh had also echoed that in his views.
We have to remember that all of this, all that he brought across, really came through from Neem Karoli Baba. And he described himself as at some points in his teaching as a ventriloquist dummy. He would be given words to say, and he just tried to tune into Maharaj-ji, and that was, his work. And that's an interesting way of seeing seva also, of letting go of your own needs and desires and allowing that deeper place to come through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also this reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi, who was somebody that Maharaj-ji also talked about as one of his teachings: be like Gandhi, be like Jesus.
Yeah.
And to see someone create and manifest their own sense of seva and service in such a way and articulating it for all of us. I think How Can I Help is another astounding piece of work as well. I have personally drawn so much from the so much that Ram Dass has talked about on these different issues. So what do you think is some sort of takeaways or takeaways for all of us as young people, as senior people, as whoever, individuals, From this seva, the idea of seva, the idea of also Ramdas's life, Neem Karoli Baba's message that we can adopt in our today to ensure that we are on a semblance of a right path, if not the right path, so to say.
Well, I was going to read a quote from the Gita, but this is from the Karma Yoga chapter in the Gita, and I was given the Radhakrishnan version of the Gita, which is still a great translation, although the English is a little, it's not contemporary English. I received it from this devotee, Dada Mukherjee, who we met in Allahabad, who's an economics professor in Allahabad. And this is from that chapter. It says, the man whose delight is in the self alone, who is content with the self, who is satisfied with the self, for him, there exists no work that needs to be done. I'm skipping a little bit, but therefore, without attachment, perform always the work that has to be done, for man attains to the highest by doing work without attachment. And you know that I once asked Dada about attachments and, you know, how to give up my attachments. And he said, well, you can give them up, or you can wait until they give you up. But it's that place that Ram Dass worked with so much about identity and how we identify ourselves, and whether we think of ourselves as, oh yeah, I work as a bank teller or a computer expert, or I do internet programming and make web pages, and we identify with who we are with what we do. And then on the other side, you know, there's the kind of Western orientation toward the intellect, going back to Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Big mistake. And Ram Dass kept saying, you're not who you think you are. You just are. You are a being. And you're not what you do. You're a being. You're a self. And that work, if you can come into yourself, that allows you and frees you, I think, of some of those attachments. And then at least you can begin to notice the places that you get pulled in by attachments. And, you know, we're all doing that work all the time. And it sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, but that's kind of the, one of Ram Dass' books was called Grist for the Mill. Those are the millstones of karma grinding us off our impurities until we become the pure self, the Atman.
He uses tapas also as one of those heat, you know, for purification. As I think in Paths to God also he has talked about suffering as the instrument to grace as well. So I and you know, that takes me to a very important sort of part. I felt before the pandemic hit us, we didn't know about the pandemic, of course, right? So when Ram Dass was passing, and then a series of unfortunate things also were happening around the same time. Besides the pandemic, we also had Keshav. I wanted to know, like, if Ram Dass was with us today, and I know that you have also worked on compiling this beautiful document, the pandemic toolkit, also for all of us, that we have also uploaded for our viewers on our forum page. But if Ramdas was with us today, what would be his advice to us on dealing with the pandemic at two levels? One is the global level, where all this is happening, and then the polishing our mirror level, working on ourselves level. So how do we, what message would you like to, as Ramdas is the bridge to Neem Karoli Baba, you are his bridge to us today. So please grant us that privilege.
Well, there's an expression in the Bible of the halt leading the blind, which means, I don't know much. And if you take my advice, what did I say? The advice is free and worth every penny. I think the aspects first, the one of, what Maharaj-ji showed through the Dr. Leary and the smallpox eradication program, that when there's a will with humanity, with people really working to help each other, we can do a lot. And the idea that we can overcome the suffering caused by the pandemic as a public health issue for all of us. Just that requirement for effort and intelligence and bringing science to bear and the goodwill of people working together. I think that's a great lesson from that. That we can dedicate our humanity to helping each other and not have it be, just the rich people get vaccines, or nor should the political people be denying that it's happening. You can't fix something if you're in denial about it. There's that great expression about denial is not just a river. But I'm hopeful that that is happening on a global scale. And I think that it is in some respects, certainly, that we're working together and trying to get through this. And I think, this sense of being together on Zoom is just one symptom of the fact that we're all interwoven on a planetary scale now. You can't just see it as an epidemic in Africa or India or the US. So I hope that part gets better. On an individual, spiritual level, there's a story about a musician has just done a great concert, and this young musician meets him and says, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, which is the great concert hall in New York City? And he says, practice, practice, practice. And all of these practices, from the kirtan and mantra and yoga and meditation, all of that helps us to get more free of our attachments and hang-ups and the sense of separateness and fear of death, and getting a little bit more out of who we think we are into who we are as one together. So it's all useful. And the fact that we have to do the inner and the outer work at the same time, I think is important.
I will actually hold you on that point itself, on the inner and outer work, because I think a lot of us sometimes are able to converge that in certain moments with our sense of purpose, our sense of being, and the work that we do. But a lot of us are sometimes living in duality, like negotiating a hard deal on one day and then trying to give 2 rupees to
Yeah.
a beggar tomorrow, or like doing the chants. Ramdas is another, I think, contemporary, your contemporary Jiddu Krishna Murthy. For example, like he's also talked about setting your house in order before you meditate and so on. So I wanted to know what your views are, and I mean, in articulating the process for a person, because it's, I think, in principle, a lot of us want to align together everything that we are doing into that one fuller understanding, unity. But how can young people, especially in this uncertain times of the pandemic, how can we develop these two things in sync, not even in a balanced way, but as a whole?
Well, we're all in the same boat. Anyone who has a body has that duality by definition, but also we have that possibility of coming into sub-ek, into all one. And the practices can help, but also the understanding that we all are in that what Ramdas referred to as our predicament, which is being in duality and aspiring to oneness, to non-duality. So I think the sense of that instills a kind of compassion for our situation. And that has to start, for each of us with our own situation. And to allow ourselves to be who we are in all of our shortcomings and aspirations and good habits and bad habits, which I certainly have my share of. And I think the wonderful thing about Ramdas' life as kind of a parable for that is that he always used his own experiences and his life as the teaching, as the examples. And some of the examples were not always shining, stellar examples of virtue. He was acknowledged his, as they say, feet of clay. And he didn't set himself up as a guru. He had this distinction between a guru and a teacher. And he talked of his, a teacher as someone who stands next to you and points the way up the road. And the guru is somebody who is up the road at the destination beckoning. And that was Maharaj-ji. He was, in India, you have this tradition of siddhas and gurus, which we don't have in the West. And Ramdas always said that Guru Kripa as a practice in the West was a hard sell because nobody in the West wanted to give up their power. But when the power is love, which is what Maharaj-ji communicated, it's easier to surrender into that space together.
Absolutely. I don't have a lot to speak because I'm still reflecting on what you're saying. So I think I'll ask you one last question, and it's going to be around an anecdote that I want to specifically touch upon, and then we will be opening the floor to questions for all of
Good.
you.
Yeah, let's do
So
some Q&A.
yeah, so please prepare your questions and raise your hand. Please put it in the chat. We will recognize you to ask your questions. And uh, we will be taking questions for the next 15 minutes. So we will all get time. Please keep your questions brief so more people can get the chance. So while you're thinking about your questions, I want to talk about this one moment which is always stayed from one of the books. Now I don't even remember which title it was for Ramdas, but about when he started printing copies very cheaply for the books, and his father was like, "You're a very terrible businessman. You could have sold them for my." And then, because I want to tie it to my previous question as well. So what was how was Ramdas when it came to these kind of things? Um, like profit, for instance, or how would he balance out, because he also led some tremendous social impact throughout the world in many ways. So how would he balance Ramdas, the development sector influencer or a person, versus his own sense of personality that was so compassionate and that didn't believe in, I mean, because we often face with these kind of, we are all faced with these kind of issues while we are deciding our policies, sometimes how much incentives to create, what not to do, and so on. So if you can talk about that story and what that means, what the story means to you, and then we will be opening the floor to questions for everyone. Thank you.
Well, the story, if it's the one you're referring to, was his father, who was a very prominent businessman and lawyer and advocate, and made a lot of money. There was always that sort of ambiguous power relationship between him and Ramdas until their later, when his later years, when Ramdas helped him at the end of his life. And he said, "Why don't you sell this?" It was a record set. And he said, "Why don't you sell this for more money? You could make lots of money with this." And Ramdas said, "Well, if you were giving it to Uncle Herb, would you charge him for it?" And his father said, "No, he's family." And Ramdas said, "Well, that's how I feel about this. This is family. It's extended family." And I think that is, the India extended family in its purest form, not when the wife and the mother-in-law are going at each other, but when it's just a loving family. And that's the sense that Ramdas had about sharing teachings and his books. And the Be Here Now was put together at a commune in New Mexico. And until 2010, when we published an ebook, Ramdas never took a penny of the royalties from it. They all went to the commune, and that community in New Mexico basically, survived because of those revenues from that project. And it feels like a communal effort. As you know, Be Here Now is almost like one of the first kind of graphic novels. And it has that handmade quality, and many people worked on it. Later he was very conscious of pricing things so they were easily available to people. And often the revenues went to causes that he was wanted to help, like, he had a foundation for many years called the Hanuman Foundation that did a lot of these projects, like the dying project and the prison ashram project and things like that. When he got stuck in Maui toward the end of his life, he got after the stroke, he was broke. He had, basically taken enough from his lecturing and traveling and talks and books to live on, but he hadn't kept anything. And Maharaj-ji had said to him early on, don't accept your father's inheritance. Don't take the money from your father. And in a curious way, that freed him from that attachment, that power relationship with his father, because if he didn't want anything from his father, there was no, leverage in the relationship anymore. An interesting thing for Maharaj-ji to do with that, to give him that instruction. And he actually ended up being the executor, the person who took care of his father's affairs after his death. And he distributed the money to his brothers' families and brothers and their families. And I don't think they even knew that he didn't take anything. It's interesting.
That's I remember I'd also heard this before, that Ramdas had no possessions by the time truly, like John Lennon talks about, imagine there are no possessions, like he genuinely didn't have any possessions. I think what he possessed was the name of God, Maharaj-ji, in his heart, and that was enough for several lifetimes, no? So
Maharaj-ji used to quote from Kabir. And there are a couple of different English interpretations of this, but it's something like, I walk through the marketplace and I am neither a buyer nor a seller. Or another way of saying it is, I walk through the market and I'm neither wanting nor not wanting. And that is that place of non-attachment. And that's what the work is for all of us in some respect. I mean, we're all, I'm born in the Taurus in the Western astrology. I hold on to a lot and I'm very earthbound. So I'm stuck as a householder.
But acceptance is something that Baba Ramdas has always stood for, and I think acceptance is what opened him up from Maharaj-ji. Unilateral love and acceptance towards him was his transformative moment. So on this, Rameshwar Das-ji, let me thank you for 1 hour of some extraordinary set of insights that you've given for today. I think it's going to stay with me for a very, very long time, everything you've said. We will now be moving to our next segment, which is for question and answers. And with the audience, they have been so gracious enough to stay on and to listen in so intently. I've been following some videos, some people on their videos as well. So thank you to all of you. You can raise your hand at this point onwards and ask your questions. We will call out your name. You can unmute yourselves and ask your questions. So you can also alternatively, if you want your question to be read out in the chat, you can, you can also mention those in the chat and we can ask the questions on your behalf. So I will welcome now, the floor is open for questions. So, okay, so we already have a question, Rameshwar Das-ji. And this is from Anshul. So I'm just going to read it out to you for everyone. Ram, I feel what you are what Dada advised, you don't have to shine. How was it like being in Maharaj-ji's physical presence and Baba Ramdas? What is the quality of that presence when you are in the same room? Ramdas said, you don't have to go through my journey. How do you think our journeys will be like? So that's the question. Thank you, Anshul, for your question.
Well, everybody has their own journey. That's very clear. I mean, that we all have our own karma to work through. And I think having darshan of a being like Maharaj-ji is, it's like, seeing a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. You get that sense of, wow, there is a being within me that could be free. And that possibility, just understanding that possibility from a realized being or one of those great beings, whether it's in person or through a book or a photograph or a video, that is what sets you on your own path. Ramana Maharshi has that wonderful quote of God, Guru, and self are the same. When you get to that place of the deeper self. So it's that a sense of a guru as kind of a reflection of your inner being, I think is maybe what is transmitted.
Thank
You
you.
still got to do your own work.
Thank you, Rameshwar. And Anshul, I will just add, I don't have anything very significant compared to what Rameshwar is saying, but I will very quickly narrate to you probably my first visit to the ashram, Maharaj-ji's ashram, right before the pandemic, as I talked about. I wanted to get a copy of the book called Miracles of Love. And we all, I think, India community knows that the book is not available in India to be. So we are always hunting for opportunities to reach the ashram, and maybe they have a copy. So I met the prabandhak or the manager of the temple, the caretaker, and I asked him. I said, I am looking for Miracles of Love. And he looked at me, and I thought that he will be happy to know that I'm a Ramdas follower or a fan of Ramdas and Maharaj-ji. And he said, why are you looking for that book? So I said, because I want to know about more miracles of Maharaj-ji. And he said that he wasn't so condescending in his tone, but essentially what he meant was, are you an idiot? Maharaj-ji would meet people walking randomly in the forests and all corners of life. Stop looking at other people's miracles of love and start looking at yours. Give Maharaj-ji an opportunity to speak to you and start listening to what he's telling you directly. So I'm just adding that 2 cents from Maharaj-ji's ashram that I earned. About your own journey, you will have to probably define it yourself. Uh, so yeah. Are there any other people who would like to ask questions? You can please again raise your hand or feel free to unmute yourself.
See,
Hey,
there's
Keshav, I
nobody
would
there.
love to answer a question. I would love to ask a question. Hey, Rameshwar, thank you so much for your time. It's been so great listening to you, all this time. And the question that I have is, you gave this example, right, about walking in the market and not wanting anything. So, and you had this intense experience in India, you learned so much, and you came back to the US, right? How was your experience when you came back, right? Versus if in this example, I have to draw it to the strong wave of consumerism in the US, right? So sharp contrast in the cultures and the ideas, that were flowing at that time. And I would love to understand this because, I got the opportunity to read several books by Ramdas, and I've tried to, strike several conversations with my friends out here. So currently I'm based in Boston. And so I've received surprisingly different reactions and would love to understand, how did you kind of, deal with that influx of idea and this totally new culture?
I'm still probably buying too many things and using too much plastic and, all of that. I try to recycle and compost and like that too. I'm a bit of a, the expression pack rat. So, and it came in handy for this book because I had all these photos and things that were from the past, but it's also, you begin to, I think, especially as I've gotten older, I appreciate the burden of hanging on to all this stuff. My wife is always trying to get me to throw stuff out. And it's becomes clearer and clearer that you can't take it with you, and that we're all just passing through. There was one of the Buddhist meditation teachers referred to it as passing show. And those three, I think they call it the triple gem, the three jewels of Buddhism, of suffering, impermanence, and the unreality of the self, no self. I think those, that begins to penetrate more, and we can begin to live a little more in that. I'm still deeply attached, and probably, I don't know, maybe getting more so, I'm not sure. But the countervailing part of that, of trying to understand our interconnectedness and our oneness together, and that what we share is to a great degree more important than our separateness. And the holding on to stuff, it's clearer for me as time goes by that is part of how I maintain my separateness. And separation on the inner level is certainly more of the illusion, the Maya that we're all caught up in. I listen to the news. I know, and it's not all good. So it's. I think that's the constant trying to come into balance that you referred to, and we all have to deal with it in our own individuality.
Thank you for your answer and your question, Nitisha. It's very relevant for everyone globally as well. That this question also takes me to one of our last two questions. One we have already got from Roy on the chat, and then one of our colleagues, Muskan, she wants to also ask a question to you. So I will first, and we will be concluding our program thereafter. But as I had said previously, I would like to remind all our members here, attendees on Facebook Live and here on Zoom, that we have a discussion forum. The link has already been posted and emailed to all of you, where you can write your reflections, comments. We will all compile them and take them to not only Rameshwar Das-ji but ramdas.org, where this video will also be available for all of you to viewing. So don't think that this is the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of a beautiful association, or rather continuing one. So I will just ask Roy's question. And thank you, Roy, for being here and also asking a question. I'll read it out now. We have to balance so many things in this earthly existence. I, for one, cannot ignore the political realities that are gripping the world. The populism, pushback on human rights and women's empowerment, so much oppression more than ever. How, from your perspective, are these challenges here to challenge us as human race to do better? And in other words, is it serving a purpose?
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I feel those as our challenges, and how we respond to that is our both our inner work and our work together as trying to make better society that's more equal, more inclusive, and more just for all of us. And you know, we all have the impulses to take care of ourselves and, you know, first and that, but we also, I think that desire to serve and to share is there too. And those are there, it is a balance that we work with all the time.
Thank you so much for putting light on that. I can only say around this that I mean there's always this dialectical process that that's always happening with setting affecting each other. So I think working on ourselves on one side can also help us build impact on the other. So I mean, Gandhi became Gandhi because he was thrown off the train and he saw the discrimination, not because of his law degree. I also have one, but I'm not Gandhi clearly. So, so yeah, it lies in both places, and I think polishing the mirror, as Ramdas has talked about so beautifully along with you, is there. We will ask one more question to you, and because the time is almost up now, and then we will. We've already mentioned the link to the book for all of you. I will request all of you once again our best wishes to Rameshwar Das ji and all the team I hope that this book really reaches many people. So that's very important to know what Ramdas stood for finally, I think, in his after all these years. So Muskan, would you like to ask your question? Please, you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question.
Yes. So thank you so much. It has been. I have had lots of words. So the question I had was, because we are remembering Ramdas, is that how do you remember someone with just the fond memories but not the bitter ones? How do you not remember the bitter memories and just the fond parts of it?
It's been curious working on his memoir because it feels almost as if he has taken on another life through this memoir. You know, his teaching as opposed to his person now is sort of merging together. And, you know, the what is clear to me is that the love doesn't die. You know, the affection between people and that merging into love together is always here. So in that, the larger sense of that, the kind of the love is the merging together, and it's his presence as extended through that.
I think it's been so hard to initially for all of us. I can share with you. It was so hard to deal with the passing of Ramdas. So in every way, like I don't even know if there's scope of thinking about bitterness, goodness. There's just so much missing sometimes for at least how I look at it. There is one question, last question. People have questions, Rameshwar Das ji. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I'm really bad.
I don't mind extending. I don't know whether you can do that in the format.
Of course, it's only our privilege. So we'll take this question. Devesh, actually, Eric has asked this question. So, Eric, would you like to please unmute yourself? You can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful early morning here on the West Coast, the United
very early.
States. No, it's been a pleasure, and something I'll remember for the rest of my life. But I just wanted to briefly ask, and we don't have to, you probably write books on this, but just thought to ask what wisdom you had to personally share in listening, surrendering, and actually serving the highest power in our societal obligations. It seems that we all have so many hats to wear, from siblings to partners to bosses and all these other things. And keeping that grounded connection to God can honestly feel overwhelming, and we get, lost in ourselves sometimes. So I guess how do you keep on burning off the right karma by truly challenging yourself and not running away from your dharma or getting, as I like to say, digging new holes? Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'm still digging holes too. I think it's kind of an oscillation. You see yourself get lost in some situation, but the seeing yourself is an aspect of awakening also, and you just keep practicing and forgiving yourself for getting lost. I think that's the hardest part. I mean, loving a guru or loving God in some sense is easy. Loving yourself and all of the limitations that we live within ourselves is tough work, and that allowing yourself to fail constantly is tough going, but we do.
Thank you, Rameshwar and Eric, for your question. And I think it's so pertinent in terms of the roles that we have, different roles we have to play and be true to. We also have Rameshwar, since you've agreed, I'm going to ask Pranshu also. He's again a big, he was really excited for the session, and Pranshu has a question for you as well. Pranshu, could you discuss that?
Thank you so much for this insightful conversation, Rameshwar, and thank you, Dais, for hosting this. So my question is that Ram Dass talks about us residing in the heart cave, right? And seeing things from a place where it's like our life is unfolding, like we are watching ourselves, our lives go by, and we are standing on a bridge. So my question is that we often forget about residing in our hearts and we act out of our minds. So what is your take or opinion on acting from our hearts, staying in our hearts, and still our action being guided with compassion and empathy?
Again, it's I have that same, back and forth between my mind and my heart, and I think that what Ram Dass portrayed with that, and he called it witnessing. That practice of watching yourself and seeing the river of experience flowing by, but not identifying with it. And it is that gradual shift of identity from what he referred to as ego to soul. And we're all engaged in that journey, and you could also call it from the head to the heart, from the mind to the heart. But these are all concepts and metaphors. The actuality of coming into oneness where you don't distinguish between yourself and others, and the experience is the same as this moment being together. that's the work, and that's the evolution. But that practice of witnessing, for instance, which is amplified by whatever spiritual practice you do, whether it's meditation or mantra or yoga or study. All of those things come to bear, and they begin to, maybe you don't get stuck for quite as long.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rameshwar. Now I'm going to just leave the floor to you for a message for all our Indian readers who will potentially be reading Being Ramdas, and just your concluding reflections for all of us. And then I will be requesting Sakshi to conclude the program with a vote of thanks, from a humble vote of thanks, a very, very humble one from our side to you.
Well, I have the same message. I'm just very grateful for being together with everyone today, and I really appreciate your assembling this dancing electron group online in the that is transcending time and space, and we're just here together. It's a very sweet meeting together, and I'm moved by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rameshwar. And we hope that the pandemic tides over, and then we are able to also host you in India, maybe one more trip and one more conversation physically happening.
I would love that too.
So our best wishes for the book also, and just our deepest appreciation for everything that you besides the speaker. I've in my last few times of getting to know Rameshwar, I've also been won over by the human being that I've spoken with and heard from all this while. So thank you for being such an inspiring bridge between Maharaj-ji, between Baba Ramdas to all of us. It's a sheer privilege. I will invite Sakshi also now. If you would like to say anything, sir, the floor is always yours.
Thank you, Keshav, for giving me the floor. And I would just like to say thank you so much for this conversation. And on the behalf of everyone, I think we all are so grateful to have you here, to take out some time. I mean, it's morning there, and join us and speak and shed light on your journey and talk about being Ramdas. I would love to connect with you personally too. And thank you, Keshav, for facilitating this conversation and asking those interesting questions, which we were itching to ask basically. And then I would also like to thank my colleagues and partners of Dais who brought this event together. The audience and attendees on Zoom and Facebook, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being so patient and for asking those amazing questions. Thank you so much. I would also like to send my gratitude to Krishna Das team and Miss Meena Rao for all they have done that has given us the privilege to read this book, and Love Serve Remember Foundation that continues to educate us on Baba Ramdas and Maharaj-ji's teaching. Thank you so much. And also the publisher of the book, Macmillan US, for the previous versions, and Sounds True for the version from January 2021, to help bring this, being Ramdas into the world. Thank you so much. And finally, on behalf of all, I think, would like to thank Baba Ramdas and Neem Karoli Baba for spreading the light of consciousness into our lives and for just existing basically, and being a guiding light that one needs when they feel a little lost, I think. And I would like to end this event with a very beautiful quote that I think has helped me, work with my egoistic self when I kind of think that the world is against me. So the quote is like, goes like, I can do nothing for you, but work on myself, and you can do nothing for me, but work on yourself. So yeah, let us just be present and be conscious and walk each other home. All right, and this book is available in India now, so please do yourself a favor, get this beautiful fees, and yes, let's start doing the work together. Yeah, thank you so much.
And Sakshi, thank you.
Ramdas used to translate namaste as I honor the light within you and within me. So, namaste.
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 Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sakshi, also for your wonderful comparing today. We are ever so grateful to you and to everyone. Thank you. Pranam, everyone, and just reminding you all that the video of this webinar, this discussion today, it will be available to you online in the coming days on the Dais YouTube channel, as well as the ramdas.org website. So we will be keeping you all in the loop through our respective pages. So do watch out and enjoy reading the book, reflecting. And if you haven't read the other books by Ramdas, I will my recommendation in the following order will be Here Now, followed by Paths to God. So that's two books I always tell everyone that no matter what happens. And of course, Be Love Now. I have a few of those right here with me, and I love the graffiti sections, like you said, so about Be Here Now. They really got to me too. So thank you all. What a pleasure, and have a stupendous weekend ahead. And thank you so much once again. Thank you. Pranam.